Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow and lament, pain, grief and despair are suffering. Association with the unpleasant is suffering. Dissociation from the pleasant is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, the 5 aggregates of attachment are suffering. If you've ever felt your life is an endless wave of suffering, you're not alone. Everything we hear has things going from bad to worse. Wars, economic crisis, natural disasters. It feels like the world is always on the brink of collapse. How do we thrive amidst this chaos? How do we find peace when it feels like we're in the middle of a storm? These are questions that Buddhism seeks to answer. At its core, ending suffering is what Buddhism seeks to achieve. It offers a path that is free of those tempests of doubt, one that is free of suffering. Nirvana. The origins of Buddhism date back to 5th century BCE in the ancient kingdom of Lumbini, now modern-day Nepal. Back then, the region served as a melting pot for religious and philosophical ideologies. Much like today, many traditions explored meaning, existence, life, and the nature of human suffering. Within this tapestry of diversity, Hinduism stood out boldly as the dominant religion. Its influence could be felt through the caste system along with its many rituals and deities. From this complex status quo, Buddhism emerged as a reform movement, one that questioned and ultimately sought to transcend the prevailing beliefs. The Buddha is the central figure to Buddhism, yet he isn't a chosen one that was bestowed this role. The figure we currently recognize as Buddha was once known as Siddhartha Gautama, a prince born into a royal family in the region of Lumbini, rich, sheltered, and luxurious. A young Siddhartha had it all. Just for good measure, his father ensured that he was ignorant of the harsh realities of this world. Much of his youth was spent in blissful ignorance of suffering. However, his fate would change at the age of 29. Venturing outside the palace walls for the first time, he encountered the 4 sights: an old man, a dead man, a sick man, and a monk. These encounters influenced the young Siddhartha to question the nature of human existence and the perpetuity of suffering. With the truth of life revealed to him, Siddhartha could not stay on the path he was born into, a life that was essentially a lie. He realized that he needed to break away. Renouncing the royal life, he ventured out on a spiritual quest, one that aimed to find a solution to suffering. To achieve this objective, he studied under various teachers, practicing extreme forms of asceticism or monkhood. This practice led to some extreme forms of self-mortification, the type his masters claimed would lead to enlightenment. However, 6 years of dedicated practice led to no insights. Now 35, Siddhartha was none the wiser compared to when he began. Acknowledging his disappointment, he realized that both indulgence and severe asceticism were not bringing him closer to the levels of understanding he passionately sought after. Instead of following a path on either side of hedonism and self-restraint, Siddhartha sought to find answers down the middle path, one that would avoid the extremes of self-indulgence and self-denial. With a new goal in mind, he meditated under a Bodhi tree. His path had taken him far from home. Now in Bodh Gaya, India, Siddhartha took a vow to remain in meditation until he had finally attained enlightenment. 49 days of deep, concentrated meditation took place, until eventually he had a breakthrough. This revelation was so profound that its effects remain strong today. Siddhartha achieved insight into life itself, the nature of human existence. The causes of suffering and the path to liberation were all clear in the eyes of the young monk. He had attained nirvana. In that moment, he became the awakened one, Buddha. Following his enlightenment, the Buddha spent the next 45 years of his life teaching dharma, or the nature of reality. Much of Buddhism's history remains well preserved. Thanks to this, we know that the Buddha's first sermon took place at Deer Park in Sarnath. It was here he laid out the foundational principles behind Buddhism. At that sermon, the 4 noble truths and the noble eightfold path were first revealed to the world. Those teachings were unlike anything many had seen before. Instead of a leap of faith seen in most religions, there was something akin to a science behind Buddhism. Its approach to understanding suffering as well as spiritual liberation was unique. Over the years, Buddha's teachings attracted a diverse following. People from all walks of life could find something in his lessons. Kings, merchants, and commoners began to follow the eightfold path towards enlightenment. With Buddha's teachings spread across the region and eventually outwards, they were passed down through oral tradition. Much of it was also written down in various scriptures that are preserved today. Over time, Buddhism evolved into different schools and traditions. and with each of these schools interpreting the Buddhist teachings in their own unique ways. Despite the differences that existed, all forms of Buddhism share the same core goal: enlightenment and the end of suffering. Before we look at the Four Noble Truths, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's episode, BetterHelp. One of the things that helps me manage the suffering of life is therapy. For the past few years, I've been in therapy and it's completely changed my life. Fortunately, I know that while most people want that experience for themselves, therapy can often be inaccessible and way too expensive. If that's the case for you, then I recommend BetterHelp, the sponsor of today's episode. BetterHelp's goal is to make therapy affordable and accessible to everyone. All you need to do is answer a few questions, and in as little as a few days, you'll get assigned to a professional therapist. If you don't like the therapist you're assigned to, or you don't feel they understand you well enough, you can easily switch to a new therapist completely for free without having to worry about things like who will take your insurance and what therapists are available in your network. BetterHelp has made it easy to get started with therapy. Just click the link in the description down below or go to betterhelp.com/aperture and you can get 10% off your first month and connect with the right therapist for you. Back to our story. Much like Christianity centers on Jesus as a prerequisite to its teachings, Buddhism's Four Noble Truths are foundational to understanding its philosophy. Dukkha is dissatisfaction, discontentment, and suffering. The inherent inadequacy of life is dukkha. Physical pain, emotional distress, and impermanence are all forms of dukkha. Even in moments of happiness, the knowledge that it doesn't last forever is dukkha. Finally, moving out of your parents' house is an amazing moment, but that marks the end of your childhood and everything you had known thus far. It doesn't need to hurt. In many ways, it's that gut feeling where life's ceaseless distress is inevitable. Birth, aging, sickness, death, these are all aspects of life we can avoid, and they come with a dose of suffering. What causes dukkha? All forms of suffering have a cause, and they boil down to the same thing: craving or desire. We constantly want things in our lives: a better job, more money, a new car, a new phone, approval from others. This endless craving fuels our cycle of suffering because nothing is ever enough. Even when you get the things you want, impermanence persists. If you had to endure extreme physical pain due to sickness, the anguish unquestionably exists. Yet for a Buddhist, the mental anguish that comes with physical pain isn't something one has to endure. With meditation and the understanding of impermanence, there's a powerful undertone to draw from. If we're not attached to the natural, healthy body, a change in its state wouldn't go beyond the physical pain. We are bound to experience sickness and injury, but how we react determines the unpleasantness of a situation. Suffering is quite difficult to deal with, which is why the third noble truth exists. The Buddha taught that suffering could come to an end. There's a state beyond suffering known as nirvana. No, not the band, but much like the band, nirvana feels amazing to engage with. When a Buddhist lets go of attachments and desires, they can break the cycle of craving. This way, they won't have to be reborn into another life of suffering. Nirvana is understood as being free from the continual rebirth into samsara, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. When all craving is gone, your soul is finally free from suffering, creating a state of enlightenment where you are awake to the true nature of reality. The state of nirvana is profoundly peaceful and liberating. In many ways, one can imagine it as taking a deep breath after life's drowning feelings of suffering have ceased. The final noble truth lays out a guided path to the end of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. This path presents 8 practices that can help individuals to live a life that is more meaningful and ultimately free of suffering. In many ways, it's the Buddhist roadmap to personal growth and happiness. Beyond just Buddhism, the path offers a poignant approach to dealing with life's problems. The road to nirvana itself, the Noble Eightfold Path. Buddhism offers guidance, but it's important to not fall into the pitfall of attachment. With this path and the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, you can remain mindful as you seek enlightenment. Like many of the Buddha's teachings, this path is fractal. In other words, it can apply to little things and it can apply to the big questions in your life. It's also a circular path, so guiding principles reinforce one another. Most importantly, it's a lifelong process. Everything that exists is conditioned by a process called dependent origination. This means everything we experience is a part of an impersonal process. Nothing is truly random, everything happens thanks to causes and conditions. If you see a plane for the first time, you wonder how flying works, and this reaction leads to questions, research, desires, and actions related to that original sighting. The right view in Buddhism involves seeing that the thing we call reality is just a web of concepts that we've created. Now you must recognize this truth and strive to see things as they truly are. This means we need to accept the Four Noble Truths and let go of the idea of a fixed, permanent self. Ego. The idea of me is actually a collection of ever-changing feelings, thoughts, and experiences. And once you're able to acknowledge this, you can support your journey through the entire path. Your mind is the source of everything you will ever produce, and therefore you need to cultivate ethical and mental self-improvement practices. Do you have thoughts filled with harmful intentions, ill will, and desire? Work on changing that. Instead, you'll need to foster goodwill, renounce desires, and cast out any desire to harm. The right intention might sound like a no-brainer, but the actual practice is important to cultivate. As your mindset becomes peaceful, you'll find that a harmonious state begins to grow within, allowing you to fully align with your spiritual goals. Now, this part might be especially tough if you enjoy a fair bit of gossip. How you speak needs to be aligned with the right intentions. Speak with purpose. If you're fond of yapping, this might be a hard pill to swallow. And more importantly, you should speak truthfully and kindly. Right speech is connected to your inner monologue as well. You'll need to learn how to be kind and honest with yourself. Words have to come from a place of truth, so your communication must build up mental clarity and peace for yourself and others. Words are one thing, but actions have always been the real test of intention. On the path, you must learn how to engage in actions that are non-harmful and ethical. Don't steal, kill, and engage in sexual misconduct. And while this might seem like common sense, it gets even deeper. Right action applies to your mental approach to meditation. Allow thoughts to fade away gently without a force and maintain a peaceful state of mind. If you have a pink elephant in your thoughts, acknowledge its presence, understand its nature, learn to coexist with it, and let it fade away. This mindful acceptance helps you cultivate a harmonious and ethical way of living. The path to nirvana is best forged by living an honest and ethical lifestyle. However, you'll still need to make a living on the path. In doing that, you should choose a profession that doesn't cause harm to others. Traditional Buddhist teachings tend to advise against occupations that involve deceit, poisons, or weapons. For modern jobs, you'll want to get into fields that contribute positively to society. Working in healthcare, teaching, farming, social works, engaging with nonprofits, these are all means of living that aim to reduce suffering. Some jobs that might not be considered in alignment with the path also exist. Dealing drugs, working as an arms dealer, being in the gambling industry, and being a shady salesperson generally aren't seen as ethical. Beyond your literal source of living, this step highlights your mindfulness and meditation in every aspect of your life. Your friends, parents, kids, and job, your outer life should nourish your meditation. The path to nirvana is best followed with a persistent amount of effort. Your behavior is one that should cultivate wholesome states and abandon any unwholesome ones. Point your mind towards the goal, but don't introduce tension to it. Meditation isn't a one-day affair, so it will take some practice. Eventually, your mind might lean out of the present moment. Maintain your focus without being forceful, and while you'll find it difficult at times, right effort is about making a diligent, conscious effort to improving your behaviors and thoughts. When you're fully aware of your thoughts, emotions, and actions in the present moment, you can use mindfulness effectively. Like effort, you will constantly need to remain aware. Observe your thoughts and actions. It's like balancing a knife's edge. Observe it all, notice the nature of your experiences without attachment or avoidance. Like an out-of-body experience, you are simply watching, learning, and ensuring that your behavior aligns with the path. Crafting your intentions and behavior through the path isn't easy. If you're on the straight and narrow, you'll achieve deep meditative absorption, jhanas, where the mind finally becomes unified and calm. This is often translated to concentration, but it goes far beyond that. It's a state of calm mixed with a pleasant abiding. With concentration, you can achieve a focused and tranquil state of mind, one that is essential for your personal growth. Buddhism is inherently tied in the belief in an ongoing cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This is called samsara, and samsara is driven by the existence of karma. While you're likely familiar with this term, karma in Buddhism refers to the law of moral causation. That is, the intentional actions of an individual result in future consequences. In simpler terms, your actions, whether good or bad, have a direct impact on your future experiences. Karma isn't fate or destiny, it's purely cause and effect. Actions, words, and thoughts contribute to our karma, and the same applies conversely. In Buddhism, rebirth isn't reincarnation. Instead of your soul transferring to a new body, Rebirth is actually the transfer of a stream of consciousness influenced by karma. It's like a spectral version of the first law of thermodynamics. There's a connection, but not a permanent, unchanging self. Our current lives are shaped by past karma, and our actions in this life will influence our future rebirths. For Buddhists, it's possible to break free of this cycle by building good karma. Eventually, one can break free of samsara and achieve nirvana. The part of Buddhism you're likely familiar with, meditation. This practice is definitely just as cool as it looks, especially once you get the hang of it. Buddhism's most practical and transformative aspects are centered on the concepts of meditation and mindfulness. Thankfully, the Eightfold Path provides a way to get started. Still, it's helpful to have some tips to get started with meditation, especially in our modern age where some nuances may get in the way of Buddhist teachings. Anapanasati, or breath meditation, is a great place to start. This practice focuses on the mindfulness of breathing. Studies have shown that mindful breathing techniques activate the amygdala, our brain's emotional regulation center. This reduces negative emotions within and stimulates positive changes in your mood. The best part is that breathing is accessible, so you could get started right now. But now you're breathing manually. Sorry, not sorry. With meditation, you'll eventually become capable of manual breathing without distress. To do this, sit quietly and focus on your breath. As your mind wanders, gently guide your attention back to your breath. Regular meditation sessions will improve your concentration and clarity, offering a precious opportunity to be with yourself, not as a collection of hopes, dreams, or disappointments, but as a living being. You're not me anymore, you're breathing, and that's a powerful relief. Popular in the United States, Zen Buddhism is a valuable form of meditation that positively affirms every aspect of your growth. This practice centers on sitting and being present. It's the sort of thing where your presence of mind allows you to appreciate life more fully and directly. To practice Zen Buddhism, sit in a comfortable upright position. As long as you're not baiting yourself into a nap, you should be fine. Ensure your back is straight and let your hands rest on your lap, and keep your eyes slightly open while gazing downwards. When breathing, use the techniques from Anapanasati. Focus on your breathing, mind the rhythm and flow of each breath. The aim is for you to be fully present in the moment. Incorporate Zazen into your daily routine if you're looking to cultivate a deep sense of awareness and tranquility. Zen meditation is the exact sort of thing you need before a big day. Job interview? Zen. First date? Zen. Final exam? As crazy as it sounds, Zen. If it's a part of your everyday life, the humongous moments will eventually be seen without the construct of desire. That clarity is exactly what helps with your success. Like the keel of a sailboat, Zen provides stability and balance. Despite the winds and waves of life, meditation keeps you stable in a storm. Even if you're having trouble adopting Buddhism's path towards enlightenment, these 5 precepts are a simple guide to get you in sync. If you want to live a morally good life, here's what you can adopt. Abstain from taking life. Try not to kill any living beings. For most people, that's an easy box to tick. If you're a semantics type of person, there are some layers worth digging into. On a practical level, this extends beyond not killing. Don't mistreat people or animals. Even if you eat meat, you've probably never gone to a slaughterhouse requesting the death of a cow for your sake. Ideally, you should adopt a vegetarian or vegan diet. At its core, treat all living beings with care. Abstain from taking what isn't given. As a Buddhist, you should avoid stealing and learn to respect everyone's possessions. This extends to your integrity and fairness in your dealings. Abstain from sexual misconduct. You should avoid sexual behaviors that are harmful to others but also yourself. If you're in a relationship, treat it with honesty and care. Practice mindfulness and be intentional. Abstain from false speech. Avoid lies, gossip, and harmful talk. Instead, we ought to speak truthfully and kindly, using our words to build up those around us rather than tear down. Even good lies might be dangerous. At the same time, context matters. If you have a friend displaying questionable life choices, it's not a bad thing to discuss a plan with other friends before a confrontation. Abstain from intoxicants that cloud the mind. Vices are an easy way out of life's most aching pains. If we want to avoid suffering, it's important to put in the real work. Avoid substances that impair your judgment and mindfulness. Drugs and alcohol tend to be a prime example. Focus on maintaining a clear mind, one that is capable of making thoughtful and conscious decisions. Following the Buddhist path is clearly not easy. At the same time, it's also super realistic. Once you start approaching nirvana, you're likely going to need to take things a step further than usual. That means thinking on a macro scale. In many ways, seeking nirvana means that Buddhism is less about managing your life as an individual, but rather confronting existence itself. As the state of ultimate liberation and peace, it sounds amazing. If you're a highly spiritual person seeking to escape the cycle of rebirth, it's the best deal you can get. The end of a long, difficult journey. As a regular individual with no grand thoughts relating to the universe, what's in it for you? In many ways, Buddhism hasn't really been about putting everyone on the same curriculum. It's not college, it's not Sunday school, it's life. Everyone has growing pains they wish they could confront. These teachings exist to help us on a grand scale, but also foster transformation on a personal level. Meditation and mindfulness exist to help you develop a calmer and clearer mind. When you learn how to live ethically, you'll gain a more harmonious life, fostering better relationships. If you've never had a moment of peace, these practices can offer solace for one. The constant noise, demands, expectations, and stress in your life won't end randomly. With Buddhism, though, you can brave through it all with a balanced state of being. If you find that the teachings suit you, apply them to your life as much as you can. And if they don't suit you, just leave them be. Buddhist teachings highly encourage your own research as a practitioner. Don't passively accept everything you hear and read simply because they're from a Buddhist. Instead, learn to question things. Much like with meditation, be gentle. Don't quickly reject those teachings either. See whether they're applicable based on your experiences along with the experiences of others on the path. You know the feeling when it seems like everybody is against you? Those days when you suddenly feel like the most incompetent person in the room and every move you make is met with harsh criticism. In those moments, it's easy to subconsciously absorb and internalize those negative comments. Without a strong support system or open communication with trusted loved ones, you might start believing those criticisms and see yourself as the bad things people say. This internalized pain, even without malicious intent, can then be passed on to those around you. For example, if you've had a bad day at work, you might come home and unintentionally take it out on your family or friends. Meditation and mindfulness offers a mental sanctuary away from the things that seem to influence dukkha within your life. Just like the Eightfold Path presents, getting in the right frame of mind will take you through the most frustrating aspects of life's journey. One of the most unique aspects of Buddhism is the lack of strict dogmas or commandments. You're not forced to feel like a failure if you stray from the path. Instead, it uses guidelines and practices to encourage a lifestyle that makes sense for your circumstances. Sure, it asks you to rise to the occasion, but not because a book said so. You are encouraged to learn the Buddhist teachings and test them. If you ever feel confused, there are many Buddhist resources ready to lend a hand. With its flexibility, Buddhism can serve as a practical philosophy and way of life. Like with many religions, Buddhism has opened itself up to some profound thinkers. One of such philosophers was Shantideva, an Indian Buddhist scholar from the 8th century CE that worked on the way of the bodhisattva. His text outlined the path of the bodhisattva, an enlightened being dedicated to helping all sentient beings attain liberation. For context, a bodhisattva is someone that sees awakening and is able to reach nirvana. However, they have delayed that stage due to compassion for beings that are suffering. It's like the ultimate empath in Buddhism. Shantideva spent a lot of his time as a monk and scholar studying the bodhisattva. From his works, he highlighted that all the suffering in the world comes from seeking pleasure for oneself. All the happiness in the world comes from seeking pleasure for others. This perspective is quite interesting because it centers on positivity as a way to create an altruistic world free from suffering. Yet, Buddhism as taught by Gautama Buddha emphasized the role of suffering as inherent in life. This perspective from Shantideva complements Gautama Buddha's work, but it emphasizes on the right thinking aspect of the Buddhist path. That's why it's important to never stop learning. Gautama Buddha gave Buddhists a guide that is functional and useful. However, he also said this: set your heart on doing good, do it over and over again, and you will be filled with joy. One of the most recognized voices promoting mindfulness and peace activism, Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, once said, to think in terms of either pessimism or optimism oversimplifies the truth. The problem is to see reality as it is. This statement encapsulates mindfulness in a poignant way. Simplistic labels and judgments are easy to attach to ideas. However, the ability to truly see and accept reality can bring compassion not only to ourselves, but others as well. Thich Nhat Hanh was a stalwart practitioner and teacher for engaged Buddhism, a social movement that seeks to apply the teachings of Buddha in order to enact social change. The metaphysical idea of a self is often challenged in Buddhism. The concept of anatta, or non-self, exists. Once we recognize the non-self, we can reach a new height on the path. At that higher level, we are no longer bound by egoistic desires and fears. Famously, the Buddha sometimes chose not to answer questions concerning the self within the universe. Instead of getting into metaphysical debates, it was more beneficial to focus on the cessation of suffering. Such speculative questions only seem to dig deeper into a hole that doesn't help Buddhism's purpose. If the Noble Truths ask us to let go of ego, wouldn't it be pointless to engage with things that aren't inherently true? Many philosophies are at odds with Buddhist ideas, so it is important to acknowledge these counter-arguments. The materialist worldview is easily one of the bigger contrasts to Buddhism. What's real is what is tangible. Only the things that exist as physical matter are worth accepting. It also proposes that everything, including consciousness, is the result of material interactions. Therefore, from a materialist perspective, your happiness and satisfaction can only be derived from physical possessions and fulfilling sensory desires. That cheeky DoorDash order is definitely real, the taste of a cheeseburger is filling, and you are undeniably happy. See it, touch it, smell it, taste it, it's literally right there. In our consumer-driven society, materialism is quite prevalent. Much of modern life is already designed around striving for material goals, and the pursuit of wealth is something heavily sought after, so why strive for spiritual enlightenment? Thinkers like Ludwig Feuerbach argued that religion and spirituality were merely projections of human desires and needs. Man is what he eats, as he once said. For a materialist, the urge to overcome desire and seek nirvana is misguided and ignorant. For a hedonist, Buddhism's detachment from desire seems counterintuitive. In hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain serve as driving factors behind our behavior. Why should we give up pleasures when they are the things that make life more enjoyable? According to hedonistic philosopher Epicurus, pleasure is the highest goal we can strive to achieve. Not what we have, but what we enjoy, constitutes our abundance. The Epicurean hedonism advocates for moderation, suggesting that true pleasure comes from a tranquil and moderate life. An interesting perspective that aligns with Buddhist teachings. The existentialist view is one of the most opposing to Buddhism. Existentialism challenges the notion of enlightenment. Instead of following a predefined path to enlightenment, existentialists argue that seeking an ultimate truth is a form of self-deception. Prominent existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Existence precedes essence, so individuals first exist before anything else. Then they must define themselves through choices and actions." The Buddhist goal of overcoming the self and achieving nirvana is in contrast to an existentialist's plight. For existentialists, the struggle to create meaning in an indifferent universe is worth embracing. Without a belief in any deity or divine being, atheism seems to be something that tangentially agrees with Buddhism. Yet, Buddhism is still a deeply spiritual experience. While it's often considered non-theistic, Buddhists still believe in karma, rebirth, and nirvana. To an atheist, this is unscientific and delving into the supernatural. Therefore, it's not worthwhile. Atheists like Richard Dawkins argued for a world that solely focused on science and reason. From his book, The God Delusion, the supernatural, which includes concepts like rebirth, lacks empirical evidence. Therefore, it should be abandoned in exchange for a rational, scientific understanding of the world. Instead of practicing mindfulness with a belief in rebirth and nirvana, atheists argue that we can adopt these behaviors due to their proven psychological and social benefits, abandoning the need for religious or spiritual justification. Nowadays, Buddhism has evolved and grown into a global religion practiced by millions around the world. It thrives in Asia with strong numbers in countries like Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Japan, and Tibet. In Western countries, Buddhism has gained notable popularity for its practicality. While Buddhism has some spiritual elements, the mindfulness practices it presents are appealing. Values like compassion and ethical living are important for a healthy society. With meditation, it's much more bearable to deal with the fast-paced lifestyle modern life promotes. In many countries, you'll find places like meditation centers, mindfulness workshops, and even Buddhist study groups. With flexibility as a helpful trait, Buddhist teachings are accessible to people from all types of backgrounds. In the same room, you'll find people on a spiritual path, those in need of a philosophical framework, and even folks simply looking to reduce stress. Best of all, it's fully judgment-free. Much of this video centers on the teachings found in early Buddhism. It's not a living tradition, so there's no dedicated sangha or followers. However, many Buddhists will still classify under Theravada. The earliest texts are explored in this practice, and interpretations focus on what Gautama Buddha taught. If you're looking further into Buddhism, chances are that you'll encounter one of these three: Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. It's important to avoid viewing Buddhism according to strict sects. After all, Buddhism centers on the same goal at its core, but all sects have varying differences in interpretation and doctrine. Theravada is the way of the elders. Theravada Buddhism is the oldest surviving Buddhist school and is practiced in countries like Thailand, Sri Lanka, Laos, and Cambodia. In this school, there's an emphasis on your path to enlightenment as an individual. For inspiration and practice, Theravada uses the Pali Canon, a collection of scriptures written by the Buddha and his intermediate disciples. Mahayana is recognized as the great vehicle. Mahayana came after Theravada's rise, however it is much more popular. You'll find it practiced in countries like Japan, China, Taiwan, and Korea. The bodhisattva is the goal. Instead of reaching their own nirvana, there's an altruistic perspective for universal enlightenment for all beings. Vajrayana Buddhism is a distinct branch of this religion that adopts elements of Mahayana with some unique teachings and practices. Here you'll find esoteric rituals, special meditative techniques, and deity yoga. On top of that, there's a role for enlightened teachers called lamas. In this school, enlightenment can be attained within a single lifetime. The Dalai Lama is also associated with Vajrayana, so there's some international recognition for that. If you were wondering what a Dalai Lama actually does, they are believed to be the manifestation for the Buddha of compassion, a type of enlightened being that chose rebirth in order to serve humanity. The first noble truth of dukkha doesn't sound so scary now, does it? Life, for all its troubles, is an experience that can be beautiful. For all the problems that suffering may bring, Buddhism offers a unique insight into the practical wisdom that can enhance our well-being. If nirvana sounds like a path you'd like to pursue, go for it. However, it's evident that teachings from Buddha are a practical guide. With such a guide, you live a more compassionate, mindful, and fulfilling life. So does suffering ever end? With nirvana, yes. Yet, many Buddhists have dedicated their lives towards compassion for others. That human need to help their kin supersedes the spiritual end to a karmic cycle. And that's why we have the bodhisattva. Service to others feels like the key takeaway from this religion. Once you have mastered your own suffering, why not help everyone else reach a similar frame of clarity? Before closing my eyes and moving towards the vision of the Buddha, I respectfully plead to President Ngden Dem to take a mind of compassion towards the people of the nation and implement religious equality to maintain the strength of the homeland eternally. Duk Kwon Duk, the Burning Monk. It's fascinating to imagine the level of mastery Kwon Duk had over life suffering. During a time where Buddhists were persecuted by the South Vietnamese government, his self-immolation garnered international outcry, which eventually led to the end of President Diem's regime. If you're a Buddhist, you're a kinder person to yourself. In turn, this makes you a kinder person to those around you. Life is challenging, but together we can make it work. One practical step at a time.